Okay. Well, welcome to Art Clinic Online. Mary Beth Mullen, and I'm so pleased to introduce today's speaker, Francie Hester. She's a friend and a neighbor, and she just happens to be a nationally and internationally recognized artist. And she's with us today to talk about her work. She has two studios, one in Kensington, Silver Spring area of Maryland, and the other in Boulder, Colorado, where she is this morning. So thanks, Francie, for getting up extra early to join us. And Francie's work reflects a variety of techniques of paint and other mixed media. She sort of applies and then excavates, and you'll see a lot of examples of that work today. Also, her themes reflect concepts of time and memory, and she'll talk a lot about her themes and how she goes through that process. So, Francie, thanks so much. I know you've had a really busy schedule, and take it away.
All right. Well, it's so nice to join everybody this morning. And I think I'll start by sharing my screen. And is that working?
Yes.
Okay. So here, I thought I would start with this one because Mary Beth's friend, her son is a gifted photographer. So this is a photograph that Jack took of me in the studio, and I'm sitting at what I call my fun table in the studio. So I thought I would start there. So here is the studio that I have in Kensington. So it just sort of sets the scene of where I work, since you guys are all working artists, and I think it's nice to see where we all create. So on the top side is the working side, and then you can see I have a second bay, and then that's the clean side, and then I'm thankfully able to exhibit, my work in that space. And I hope down the line, I'd love to do little small pop-up exhibits. So in that space, but it's with the pandemic, not all that kind of stuff shut down. And then now I'm in the Boulder studio here. And that's an example. So we came out and got a house out in Boulder during the pandemic. And so we built a small studio just right next to the house. So here, I was just going to talk about process. A lot of I work on a variety of materials, and I think of myself as a painter, but I paint on sculpted materials. So I work on aluminum, honeycomb, steel, fiberglass, and you can see, I use eyedroppers, I use a variety of materials. This is a steel vessel. Sand it down, build it back up. So a lot of the color, yeah, I guess this is an example of some of the finished pieces of the steel vessels and how they attach to the wall. And then here's, I don't know if people are familiar with the honeycomb panels, but they're incredibly lightweight. So you'll see this one is a curved piece, and they're very lightweight. So that might just weigh 2 pounds. And then my work it's very physical. So I build up the surface, sand it down. I use sometimes a drill press, hand drills, sanders to create a surface that has a lot of depth. And then I work in the aluminum. I reveal it. You can see in some of the pieces where it's like a patina. So it's kind of distressed, and then I polish it back up. And the way I work is when I build up all the colors, a lot of the times when I sand, the color comes from underneath. And then, then I'll, probably put some accent colors in the top. So this is sort of an example of, you saw the eyedroppers. So I use pouring mediums, pumice stone, coarse pumice stone, a variety of materials, build it up. Then I use my sander, sand it back down, cut off aluminum, and then I use drill bits, and it's quite physical. I think Mary Beth had asked me once, like, why did you move into aluminum panels? And part of it is that my work was just so physical that just working on canvas, I would just sort of poke through the canvas and destroy it. So I decided I needed something, a material that I could really attack in a way. Because my work does revolve around themes of time. This is sort of, this series is called Intertwine. And yeah, I think you can kind of recognize the mechanics of some of it, like possibly a clock or marking time. So you see sort of the drill holes. And so it's how the sense of time is finite versus time as being fluid. And so that's what that series is, which kind of leads into, you know, how I work. Am I jumping around too much, or is this okay? Good.
No, it's great, Francie.
Okay, so I work in bodies of themes. So this is the intertwined theme, and then one theme moves into the next theme. Whoops. I'm doing Google Docs and it's very. So I work on different themes, and I'm trying to think. So part of it is the intertwine, and then I do a series about memories. So then I do some research and think about it, and then I look at electric currents in the brain. So I'll do something called connectomes. So each body of work sort of connects to the other one. And then also I have a pretty active process of drawings on, as well as working on sculpture pieces. And I usually take, again, I take the paper and I still sand it down and build it back up. But when I use the paper pieces, they're more personal and intimate. This is another practice that I do. This is the daily drawing series that I did this in 2008. And this probably is a good example of how I think and how I do process. So I took a larger piece of paper that I did in like 2007. I cut it up into 8 pieces, and I cut it up into divided up into 40 pieces. And then I wanted to do a piece a day, you know, really force myself to complete one drawing a day. But I wanted to set up a framework so you didn't really look at an empty page, because I thought that's just way too challenging, you know, to try to go from a blank page from nothing to something within a day. So I tried to set up a type of building blocks of thoughts that, so when I sat down each day, I could just respond to what was already on the page. So I took the concept of safe spaces and something of contemplation. So I took gold leaf, which my daughter was in the Peace Corps, so it was from Myanmar. So each piece has a piece of gold, and that was supposed to be like a spiritual connection. And then I took the sense of, I don't know if you can kind of sense this, but I was thinking architecturally, what's a safe space? So I thought of like a courtyard. So then I tried to create these as sort of interior spaces. And then I took a 22-inch circle, and then I fragmented it and then just made shapes out of a 22-inch circle. And so that was the parameters that I used. And then I would sit down with the page, and then I would do the drawing on top of it. So it's a great practice. I do this kind of often because I think it's sort of grounding, because I think when I'm just painting, and it's very physical, and you're sort of moving in a generally sort of a quick, slow, but the drawing kind of brings you down, it kind of centers you, and then it really helps with the larger pieces, and it becomes a vocabulary. And then just to show you the different ways that I use vocabulary, and I use sort of the building blocks of the theme. So this was during the pandemic, And what I noticed during the pandemic, as we all did, is that our footprint was so truncated that we had our homes in whatever format our homes were, the layout of our homes. And then we were so restricted in our movements, and we sort of redefined how we live day to day. And so each one of these pieces in advance of the daily drawings, I prep them. It takes me like a month to prep all these pieces before I draw on them. So I wanted to create, I used different pumice stones or something of like sand or, something solid. And there are shapes of like a footprint that you would see, you could recognize in these shapes. And then I used these sort of rigid pathways with, the swirls through it. And then I used these small sort of entry points, of the dots of where you come in and where you come out. This
What
sort
is the size of,
of, those are 10 by 17. Yeah, so they're small-ish. Yeah, but then there are 40 of them, so they add up into a large series. And should I move into my art and healing? Is that the word fall?
Yes, but before you do, Francie, could you talk just a little bit about the prep that takes so long before you actually engage in these works? Because that's really interesting.
Yeah, so yeah, there is you mean sort of intellectual preps of how I want to.
Yeah, when you're going through that process, the daily drawing, it's such a, you're talking about so many of the benefits of it to you as you then explore other parts of your art. But how do you prep an individual piece before you actually even begin?
Yeah, well, it's something that maybe if I could I'll step way back and just sort of show you how I think. After 9/11, I went back to the studios. It was like a universal moment where we all stopped, and we had to, like, spiritually, physically, we just had to regroup. And I, at that time, was creating, imagery you would recognize. You day-to-day life. They were very lyrical pieces. There were probably a lot of animation to them. And I thought, I can't do that anymore. So I eliminated all imagery. And I thought, where do I connect spiritually to myself and to the rest of the world? What is that? What is my spiritual connection? Your first spiritual connection. Is it sound? It's just your senses. And I thought, it's really a gregarious, it's like a chant. It's actually like a hum. It's like a spiritual note. And so I thought, okay, that's where I'm going to begin my work. And so I'm going to do work that looks like chants. So you can you see behind me the long, thin strips? So I started, it's not part of that series, but I've maintained the format. So I created these long, thin aluminum strips, and I created the surface, and I would build up the surface and create something like a beautiful passage. And I thought, no, I'm going to stick to my theme, and I would cut out and eliminate anything that was beautiful. And I thought, do you then think, is beauty there even though it's gone? Do we sense that beauty was there? Is our longing of what was there, do we still feel that? And so I was really rigid about creating pieces within this theme, which is kind of, in a way, restrictive, but in some ways it made me go deeper into what I was thinking. And then from that series from Strata, so I'm going way back from 2001, that led to the next series about vestige and how we unearth things and what's sort of important to us. And then I got into memory and started to do a series, connectomes, thinking about the currents in the brain and studying that, and then using brain scans and etching those into the aluminum. So it's just like one thing leads to the next.
Do you find that there's a lot of cross-pollination between your different concepts that you're exploring at times, or are they always kind of seamless, or do they kind of go back and forth between one body or one concept versus the other?
You know, it is kind of a nice, it seems to evolve pretty nicely, but I remember, you know, sometimes I'm sure you guys all know this as artists, like you're working on something, you're like, oh, that's really interesting. You know, that worked out really well, but that's not really what I'm talking about right now. And so I'll take that little germ of idea and then move it, you know, move it to the next painting, because you can just say too much in one painting and then, you know, you don't stop. It's like, for instance, like we saw the daily drawings, you know, where I was talking about format and how we sort of redefined our lives to something, you know, our patterns were so defined for us. And then we started to open up. And that's part of the, let's see. So this is part of the show that I have right now is Confluence. So sorry, I'm flipping ahead. This, but you can see in this slide how I moved. Hopefully you can see how I went from those daily drawings, and then I moved it to a larger format, and I'm talking about Confluence. So I had this sense, okay, yeah, we started moving around our patterns and what we were doing. So created these very animated painting, you know, with colors and this, that, and the other thing, you know, because it's all the excitement of moving and things confluence of hitting each other, you know, the paint one way or the other. And then what I did is that I put an overlay, I put like a network on top of it. So I created, you know, I put circles and lines and things on top of the surface that I created to create this kind of tension that's going on underneath the surface, and then putting this networking or a lacing on top of it. So
Francie, are you actually are you sanding or revealing the pathways from sanding or removing the say white layer? And
it's
really
a little bit of both, but you can see in these two current paintings that it's kind of underneath.
Yeah, beautiful. Are you leaving behind that it cannot be beautiful?
Yeah, yeah, beauty is definitely in there. But I still, you know, those kind of thoughts, they're like building block, you know, that, you know, you learn something in one series and then you just kind of carry it through to the next.
And going back to, if you don't mind, Mary Beth's question, you're preparing the panels for a long time. Is that what you mean? Is that a word to say that you're layering and then you're going to reveal?
Yeah, you mean like the surfaces? Yeah. So I build up to reveal them, you know, hopefully later. Well, this sort of jumps in. So the other series that I'm working on too right now, which I'll show in New York. So you kind of saw on the last image of the confluence how I'm creating this kind of network on top of the sort of this animated surface. So I was thinking about you know, those connections, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting what's happening there. And I was also thinking about how with the pandemic that days blurred, and now we're sort of marking we're back to kind of this day-to-day marking of time. And so I wanted to do a series where you're kind of, it's like like a personal orientation to a day. And so I thought, well, what format would that take? Or like, what shape is that? So I decided to work on X's. So I have 50 fabricated plexiglass X's. And then I also have several large scale 6-foot aluminum X's that I'm working on. So that's what's happening in the studio right now. So I included the image of what the aluminum looks like when it comes to my studio. It comes in these huge crates. It's a specialized material. It's made in Minnesota. It does have industrial uses. You can use it for airlines. Airplanes use it for insulation and things. But this company makes it for museums when they reline a painting. They would adhere a masterpiece to the substrate because it's not affected by moisture and also damage. So I paint on top of it. So it's a wonderful material, and it's a bit of a challenge for them to figure out how to do it, how to curve them. But I've been working with them for years. So,
What paint media do you use? Are you using acrylic or?
it's all acrylic. I find any kind of pouring medium sticks to everything. So, I mean, for aluminum, you can buff it up and use 409 on it and sort of take off there's a natural oil that comes to aluminum, and then you can literally paint on it.
Without priming, right?
Yeah, I used to prime. I used to get, metal primer. And then I started just using like any kind of pouring medium. And it's like, oh my gosh, that sticks to everything. So I don't use the primers like I used to. But I've enjoyed it. I've worked in this material for a long time. So the other, besides working on sculpted material, I also do work on art and healing. And this is a permanent installation piece at Memorial Sloan, Kettering. And here you see an image of, that's me with my collaborator, Lisa Hill. And she's also in the studio in Kensington. And this is a series based on Brendan Ogg's words. He was my son's best friend growing up. At the age of 19, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and he had surgery to remove the tumor, and he lost his memory and his physical mobility. But within a year's time, he gained back his memory and most of his mobility, and he wrote a book of poetry. And that was published just before he died, which was, tragic. So we wanted to do a piece that memorialized his words and his legacy, but also to share in kind of the grief that anybody goes through with loss, and the importance of community and support. And so it's an art and healing piece. And this one is wrapped by, well, I'll take a step back. It's a complicated story, so jump in if you lose me. But so we took 7 of Brendan's poems, we abstracted them, so they go from dark to light, which sort of reflect about how his mind and memory was jumbled and blurred, and then it came to sort of clarity. So to sort of deal with that span of emotion. And then it's an origami wrap. And let's see, it shows you the slide. It's a gatefold. And it's also a highly labor intensive. I don't know if this is going to work. It's a highly labor intensive piece, so it takes over a year to do the wrap. So we had like 350 people help wrap the piece.
And Francie, a lot of the people that were involved were your neighbors and friends, people who volunteered to do this, having known Brendan.
Yeah.
Can I just ask how you got involved with Sloan Kettering in the first place? Did you know someone who had been treated there years before, or what was the connection point there?
Well, my gallery's in New York, and they had an art consultant that looked on the gallery's website, and she noticed that I had done a previous piece in memory of Diane Granite Yalowitz using this paperclip, wrapping circles in art and healing. And she reached out to me and said, can you propose something for Sloan Kettering for their atrium in their surgical center? And I went, absolutely. So it was my first I've done large scale commissions in aluminum for atrium pieces that are 16 feet tall or something. But I've never done a piece like this. And they were amazing to work with. I mean, it was just really, really lucky that we had this opportunity to have it. And they're a wonderful client because they're so supportive. So we got a second commission for them, which was a spiral staircase in the young adults with cancer. And for that one, as probably everybody knows, when you're in a hospital, there's a lot of idle time. So we created essentially these like little wrapping boxes, and it has instructions on how to wrap, what colors to wrap, how to do it. And then we would give them to patients and patients' families. So when they're getting chemo treatment or just relaxing, with their loved ones in rooms, they would wrap. And then we would keep track of everybody who wraps, so they would be, felt part of the community. And they do take about a year to complete. So it's a very gratifying project. And then the Innova is a new one, and that's like 60,000 wrapped paper clips, and that's in their Shar Cancer Institute. So that was a piece that we did for them. The one in New York it's public, so you can always go visit that. It's in their atrium at 61st in York.
So I know this is a collaborative. Word Falls collaborative. Have you done other collaborative projects in any other media?
I guess I did a knitting. That was another one that we did for Brendan. I don't have any images of that, but since Brendan was 19 and it was my son's friend community, of friends, most of the time, especially at that age when there's such deep grief, people kind of go into their corners of grief, understandably. But I felt there's such an important age to somehow bring everybody together. So we created these knitting circles, and I found these beautiful indigo dyed wool, merino wool it was a woman's cooperative, I think in Venezuela. So everything has to be like spiritually sound. So I sourced the yarn, got large knitting needles. I don't know how to knit, but I knitted. And we created these long strips of these kind of indigo. So it would go from blue into purple. And everybody, I think we had people knitting circles all over the world. I had people coming in from Spain, I mean, not Spain, Sweden, Europe, like they found out about this project and they all started knitting a piece. And then we did this large scale, it's called encircled. And so we just wrapped and wrapped and wrapped. So it's this massive, massive circle of knitted panels from a variety of people. It was very powerful.
Yeah. Now, art as healing, especially with community, bringing people together, it's a wonderful concept.
Yeah.
I had a question about your series. Do you always work in a series? I think I asked you this previously about themes, or do many of the pieces also stand alone in your mind?
You know, I find themes really, you know, or it's a theme, and then I set up a type of vocabulary, and I try to stay true to that vocabulary, because I feel like even though you're kind of limiting yourself in a weird way, it's like, okay, I'm only going to use a 22-inch circle and I'm going to use that to fragment. I mean, it sounds so rigid, but I find that way kind of liberating, because you have to ask yourself less questions. Like, okay, I'm going to take this circle and I'm going to chop it up in any way I can, and I'm going to respond to it. Or, you know, I'm like, well, okay, there's another series that I'm working on called, there's a theme of crossing lines. It could be through lines, racial lines, property lines. I mean, just use the word line. And like, how do you depict that? How do you depict crossing lines? So I created just this variety of shapes. And then I did sort of block, used the rough pumice stone, and use that as sort of bricks, feeling like bricks that sort of hold into place all this movement. And then I would chart these lines and drill into the aluminum. So that's a series that I have up in Virginia in that show, from that series. I don't have any, they're on my website, but.
Francie, there's a question from Ellen. Would you mind unmuting, Ellen?
I'm simply interested in your, how you sort of work your brain through your processes, how you come up with the creative sparks that go, yes, this is the direction I'm going. If that'll spark something you can respond to, at any rate. I don't want to guide you in that direction.
Yeah, I think spark is a really good word, because, for instance, in one of the pieces that I have up in the Virginia show, I did that. Part of it is hand drawn. I have a drawing where I use my hand. I have not had an element in my, besides fine lines, where I freestyled my hand. I used to do that all the time. It was the first time that I've added an image like that, where I have my drawings. I have my own hand. And I thought, and that was a spark. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I thought, oh, maybe I think that's a theme about transformation, or things, something coming out of a cocoon, or something revealing itself. So I have a feeling that was a spark that I'll probably pick up in the next series. But it's the thing is, I think the tricky part sometimes for me is to know when a series is done, because I'll get, I order 50 fiberglass X's, I order 6-foot X's. And then whether I do reorder it or do I not. So I think I didn't show any of the vessels here, but I've probably done 50 vessels, and then it kind of runs its course. But there's some formats that I definitely always, I maintain like the strips behind me. I started that in 2001, and I still have a set of, I'm always working on a set of strips because I sort of think of them as sort of my own visual diary of how I'm feeling. So
Would you mind talking a little bit about kind of your relationship to controlling the image? Kind of elaborate on the question. Like I'm thinking about, you mentioned that you kind of switch gears from more, I want to say representational, but at least like recognizable imagery around 9/11, and to kind of going through this process of sanding and so forth, where I think you are giving up a lot of the, I guess, control over what it should look like and letting chance have more relationship with the outcome of the image. What is your kind of relationship to control, and do you miss having pure control at all, or is it just the surprise is so exciting?
that's a good question. Yeah, because yeah, there is such an element of chance that you never want to give up on that, like that fluidity of when you're just flowing and just let things come out. But then sometimes I think I can over control that. Like I'm like, you're too crazy. I'm going to take you down a bit. So maybe I should leave more of the fluidity out. But I think I find that that's kind of the yin and the yang. That's your struggle, right? Is that you want to keep it fresh. You want to keep it vibrant. You want to feel that kind of passion, the kind of excitement, but you also want it refined enough. So I really try to edit my work down a lot. So sometimes I will have a lot of like work that's very exuberant and very accident prone and wild. And then I come back to it day after day. And I'm like, no, I just don't, I'm just seeing craziness. I need to refine and take down sort of the chance. So the chance actually means something. I mean, that's sort of the struggle, because you think, okay, that's pretty, but are you talking about anything? Like, what is that saying? So I really try to be loyal to a theme. So when hopefully somebody looks at my work, they'll see a story, even though it's abstract. Like there will be a narrative. And if I let go of that, then if there's too much chance, then you don't see it. I mean, I love Jackson Pollock, but it's kind of like that. You start out like really moving the paint around and loving it. It feels so good. And then you come back and you're like, I like you, but you're not saying anything, or it's been said before. So does that answer?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that question could be answered. It was kind of I don't know if it's a mean question or not, but it's something that I always ask questions about battling these issues. So, and my follow-up question may sound a little bit more mundane, but for an artist who is exclusively working as an artist, and I'm curious what like a daily routine looks like for you. Like walking into the studio, does it take time to get into the groove of making art, or does it, do you have to have a cup of coffee? What does a daily routine feel like?
Coffee? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm definitely, I go to the studio every day. Almost, especially like right now, it's pretty much 7 days a week since I have, thankfully, I have a show coming up. I come in and I work. Even if I'm busy or something, I will always go to the studio. And even if I'm drawing, or even if I'm just cleaning up, I have to be there. But it's pretty rigid. I mean, I've been, if you look at, how, the path of a cow or something, that goes to the trough, I'm one of those people that I'm very dedicated to my work. And I mean, and I think sometimes, as everybody with artists, if you don't have a deadline, that's hard, because you're like, okay, I'm coming in every day. Does anybody know? Does anybody care? There's these times you're like, You're like, hello, I'm here. I've told this story to Mary Beth. I think there was a phase where I literally had nothing. There was nothing happening. I was like, this is crazy. Like, I'm not getting any call. Like, I have no commissions. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I thought, I have to pretend that I'm having a show next spring. And so I created a huge body of work. And it was like 3 different series. I was working with fabricators. They were coming to my studio. I was like, I need this, this, and this. And he's like, wow, you must have a really big show. I was like, no, I have no show. I'm pretending I have a show. And it's like, that's different, but but then the weird thing is, I got a call from a gallery in New York. I got a call from one in California. And then I had 4 shows in 6 months, but I had the work, and that's where you have to play these like crazy games with yourself, because things can happen and do happen. But if you don't go in there every day or when you can, if you don't commit to working, it's really hard when opportunities happen, because you're like, oh, I don't have anything,
It's a field of dreams moment.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, how else are we supposed to work? It's this strange kind of career where you go in by yourself, creating something out of nothing, and then you have to, if you want, feel like your something creates the something outside of your studio, which, and in some level you think, what does that matter? But then there's a part of you is like, no, I actually do want to connect. I want my work to connect to the greater world. So, I mean, that's kind of a interesting dilemma that we all face.
I have another question, if I may. It's beautiful. Your art is beautiful, and I hate to say it because you may not like that. But
No, I
don't hate to say it. It's wonderful. But when did you start? When did you think you would become an artist? But I also want to ask you an unrelated question. Is art making healing to you?
Well, yeah, I would say making art is healing, but I find it sort of grounding. It's like, I mean, that's probably, yeah, especially with the daily drawings. I think that definitely is a centering. But it definitely is a type of therapy. I mean, it can be kind of tormented, but yeah, it can be good. But going back to orientation into the arts, I as a child, I wanted to be an artist, and I thankfully had a very supportive, parents. My mother worked at the museum. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. So we grew up like walking around the museums as little kids and giving them, showing us, what to look for in paintings. So I was always sort of oriented and focused. And then I have a bachelor's and a master's in fine art. And then I also spent a year studying in Florence, Italy with Syracuse University and I worked in a painting conservation studio. So that was an amazing experience. So I was working with paintings from masterpieces from the Medici collection. And, I love painting. And that's a true test, because there I am in Florence working on beautiful, beautiful old masterpieces.
Francie, I have a question. You've approached it already, the business side of art. Like, how do you find the time? How do you balance it? Because I know the struggle in wanting to share it, but how do you balance it? Because it's a whole other career to do that.
It is, and a lot of times it does revolve in personal connections, but I mean, the business side, what I found, just logistics. Art consultants are great, because they can place your work sometimes residentially, but also in businesses. So they're a really good, that's a good vehicle for me, you know, because you can show with your gallery. Sometimes you have the show with them. And then things happen. But then once you've shown the work, you can't really show it again. So then what do you do with this body of work that hasn't sold? So that's where the art consultants can kind of step in. So it's kind of building a relationship with, you know, first of all, a community of artists, but then art consultants and then galleries.
Yeah, because you need the momentum to keep work. You're gonna be inspired to keep working, but the momentum of having those connections.
Yeah, it's a challenge. There's sometimes, I mean, I don't have assistants or anything, but boy, it would be nice. You can imagine, it is nice if you can have, so if one did hire somebody who's like, okay, you take care of that part. But,
Yeah. Well, congratulations on your shows too.
oh, thanks.
I have a question. Hi. I am really impressed with your work. I think it's absolutely remarkable, beautiful, thoughtful, creative, and I would love to see more of it. And I'm local in Washington, and yet I'm going to Boulder, as it happens, in April.
Oh, great.
Is it possible to visit your studio here or there?
Yeah, I'm for sure both places, but you can just email me, francie.hester@gmail.com. And but I have an open studio on April the 30th.
Okay, well, I'll come to the April 30th open studio.
You're welcome to come anytime. I mean, you know, I'm usually there, and you know, it's happy to have visitors. Oh, and you know, Kensington it's definitely a little more hopping than it used to be. I've been in that space 28 years, and there's a new gallery, Pazzo Fine Art, and
Right.
you guys have been in there, but she's showing some great work.
Yes, right. Okay. Thank you. I'm trying to find the chat.
And also just, you know, visit Francie's website, franciehester.com,
Yeah.
and you can see her upcoming shows. There's one in Arlington and another in New York in May.
Yeah, I have done that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay.
Right. Any other questions for Francie? Thank you so much, Francie.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this morning, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. It's very, very interesting.
It's been wonderful. Yeah, your light in Boulder looks pretty darn nice, so enjoy the day.
The sun is shining. 2 days ago, it was snowing. So winter is still here. It's good. So.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Mariana and Jordan.
Thank you, Mary Beth, for
Thank you so
fantastic
much.
job
This
of
was
opening.
absolutely great.
Terrific.
Thank you for
you.
your
Thank you.
Bye.